together several book lists on this channel, and the difficulty with book lists is that every reader level is different. We kind of have an idea based on grade and age exactly kind of where they should be when they're reading. The problem with that is that most children are at different points in their reading journey. And so when you are looking for books and when you are picking out books for your child, look for these three things. Number one, independent reading level. This means that they are able to read it easily on their own. Maybe the vocabulary is a level down from what you would say is challenging. It's something easy that they can pick up and read without any outside help. The second level would be instructional reading. This is ability to read, but they need somebody to sit with them possibly and help them sound out larger words. Typically, they'll be able to comprehend it still because it is not so difficult. It's just a bit of a challenging read. And that's usually the sweet spot that I kind of sit on with my book lists. I sprinkle in a couple of easy reads that they can just flow through really fast, and then a couple of instructional reading levels where they are being pushed a little bit with their vocabulary, pushed a little bit with their fluency, might have to slow them down a little bit. The third reading level will be frustration level. This means the vocabulary is way too difficult, way too advanced, that they cannot read it because they are focused so entirely at sounding out each individual word because the definitions, their word bank hasn't reached that level yet. Those books I tend to avoid. If there's a really difficult book that I want my kids to read, I typically wait until the very end of my reading year and I reassess where they are at and if they are ready. If it is still at a frustration level, I wait another year, man. I don't want to push my kids so hard that they are frustrated while they are reading. And if that's what you're experiencing now, then you need to back down a couple reading levels in their books. Louisa C. Moats wrote a book called Straight Talk About Reading, and the first half of the book is kind of the history of the 1990s push and pull about phonics and whole word, and it gave a really clear understanding and definition for those two strategies, and also kind of the involvement of how reading has changed in America. Highly recommend reading, especially the last half, which actually goes deeper into the science of reading and also strategies. It's dated. It's an older book because it takes place, I think it was published maybe in the early 2000s, but it's definitely worth looking at if you have struggling readers. She's also done a couple of other books about dyslexia that are very interesting. How many of us have Goodnight Moon memorized? Show of hands. How many of us? How many times have you read a book to your kid right before going to bed and just being like, I have this whole book memorized? Why is it important to reread these books? Fluency. By rereading stories, our children catch those patterns and they make those connections in sentence structure. They're also connecting the sounds that they are hearing when they read out loud or to themselves, however it is, how it's going to lay out next. And it makes their fluency that much quicker. When you've read a book once, it's enjoyable. And I've read this book, and you set it to the side. No, read it again. Read it a couple of times because you capture new ideas and new thoughts, and you become a better reader by rereading books. Let's talk about reading comprehension. Reading comprehension, I believe, mostly comes from motivation. Are they motivated to understand what they are reading? They did a study in North Carolina about boys and why they seem to lag developmentally behind when it comes to reading. And they found was that these boys weren't necessarily developmentally behind. They just weren't interested in the reading material that they were being offered. Typically, it was a book about horses and ponies and kittens and, or little animals, which, for some boys it was like, okay, but it wasn't holding their interest. A lot of it was fiction-based about a little girl. Again, didn't really hold their interest, therefore they weren't motivated to comprehend what they were reading. They did not care about best friends or fluffy-duffy stuff. So in this study, they began to introduce nonfiction, things that boys would be interested in. They asked the boys, what would you guys like to read? Go figure. Their reading comprehension skyrocketed. All of a sudden, they were reading really well and competently like their girl peers. It wasn't a delay on their part of development. It was the fact that they just weren't interested in the material that was being offered. If you're having a reading comprehension struggle in your homeschool, look into other books. Ask them, what are you interested in reading? That means some classical fiction that I love and adore, they do not enjoy. And part of that also is an age range. I had my oldest read Secret Garden at an appropriate age level. And she was not interested in it, man. Did not hold her interest. She was like,
I don't get it. Why are you making me read this?
I waited a couple of years until she was older, and now it was kind of an easy read for her, but it held her interest so much better. She comprehended the story and the beauty of it so much easier because I waited until she was a little more mature for it. So this does not mean you need to hold off on classical literature indefinitely. It just means that you need to make sure that when you are gauging comprehension, that you are giving them books that they want to read. If you're struggling with reading comprehension, another idea to help along rather than just focusing on, okay, well, my boy really enjoys spiders, that's all they're gonna read, is to ask them engaging questions, direct answered questions. Let's see, wait, here. Miss Piggle Wiggle. The idea being you say, who is this person? Well, it's a lady and she's got children here. Why are the children holding on to this old lady? Who's Miss Piggle Wiggle? Is that really a name? And you ask them a couple of engaging questions on this, and then they are in turn reading to find out who is Miss Piggle Wiggle and who's that weird cat that's dancing next to her and why are these children hanging on her and why is her name Miss Piggle Wiggle? Actually, I don't even know why her name's Miss Piggle Wiggle, but it is a phenomenal name. Asking those answer direct questions really does help as they are reading because those questions are bouncing around in their subconscious waiting to be answered. And when they do see the answer, they become excited. It's a bit of an acknowledgement of, oh, I know this. I found out. I discovered it. I also want to make a little disclaimer here with reading comprehension because you assume that because they can read it fluently that they are comprehending it, which isn't necessarily the case. They could be omitting some words. There could be holes. They could be reading it too quickly to understand. They could be reading it way too slowly to remember what they have just read. So even if they are reading fluently, it does not necessarily mean that they have comprehended what they have read. Knowing and understanding phonics helps produce fluent readers, but that is not the end game. There's still many other skills that need to be adapted and worked on, like fluency and comprehension, before you can say, oh, they are competent readers. I have used Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons, and I definitely would recommend watching this for more tips on reading.